In a quiet corner of Belle Mead, where appearances carry weight and silence often speaks louder than truth, there's a beauty salon that caters to the city's elite. Bliss and Belle was polished, predictable, and perfect until one Tuesday morning when the front door opened and a black man walked in. He wasn't greeted with words, but with judgmental glances. Yet, in the middle of that space, filled with quiet prejudice, a young stylist named Brittany did what no one else dared to do. She stepped forward and treated him like a human being. Stay with us to hear the full story. And if you believe Brittany deserves respect for what she did, leave a comment with the number 1. If you disagree with Brittany's actions, comment with the number 2, and we'll explain why this story just might change your mind. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more real, powerful stories like this one. Brittany Saunders, 28, stood at her station, gently brushing through the shoulder-length waves of a talkative client. Her eyes occasionally drifted to the front window, watching the morning sunlight glide across the polished hardwood floor. She liked the quiet of early mornings, before the heat of the day, or the opinions filled the room. At 10:31 a.m., the door chimed. The entire salon shifted its attention toward the entrance. Conversations slowed to a murmur as a black man stepped through the door. He was in his 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, with a deliberate calm in his walk. He wore a fitted white shirt, dark jeans, a camel wool overcoat folded across one arm, and a leather-bound planner in his hand. His brown shoes gleamed, and on his wrist glinted a vintage Longines timepiece. Quiet, expensive, and unmistakably intentional. "Good morning," he said to the receptionist, his voice measured, articulate. "I'm Elliot Brown. I booked a 10:30 appointment online yesterday." The receptionist blinked, her fingers pausing over the keyboard. Just a moment," she said. Her tone had shifted. The warmth used on earlier clients vanished, replaced with the cautious flatness of someone thrown off by the unexpected. As she clicked nervously, whispers bloomed across the salon. "Did he say Elliot?" someone muttered. "What kind of man books here?" said another. Sandra leaned over to whisper, not too quietly, "Did he get lost on the way to the barber shop?" A chuckle followed. "Maybe he thinks we do fades," said Amy, flipping her comb and rolling her eyes. "Should we offer him a hot towel and a prayer?" Brittany's fingers clenched slightly around the brush she held. She looked at Elliot, who now stood, silent but dignified, by the window. He made no move to interrupt. He simply opened his book and read, as if used to being ignored, as if expecting it. The receptionist turned to the stylists, her voice pitched just low enough to avoid blame. "We're kind of booked. Can anyone take him?" Every stylist averted their eyes. "I've got a root touch-up at 11, one said. "I have a regular coming in any minute," offered another. "I don't do coarse hair," someone whispered with a slight sneer. "It's not the same as ours." Sandra cleared her throat, raising her voice just enough. "Honestly, it's not our specialty. I mean, it's a different texture. We'd probably mess it up, right? Best not to take the risk." Another stylist, smirking, added, "Maybe his assistant thought this was a full-service barbershop. Do we even have clippers?" The room teetered between feigned professionalism and thinly veiled contempt. Brittany stood frozen for a second, her jaw tight. She saw the way Elliot didn't flinch, didn't sigh. He turned a page, still reading, still waiting, still making everyone in that room look smaller, just by refusing to shrink himself. She excused herself from her client with a soft apology and crossed the room, ignoring the eyes that followed her. "Mr. Brown?" she asked gently. He looked up, meeting her gaze with quiet calm. "I'm Brittany," she said. "I'd be honored to take care of you." A pause, then the faintest nod of gratitude. "Thank you," he said. As she led him to her station, the silence deepened, not from curiosity, but from judgment. The kind that slithers along the edges of polite society, always present, always pretending not to be. She wrapped the cape around his shoulders and began her consultation. "Trim and taper," he said. "Neat, clean, a little classic." Her fingers moved to his hairline, parting and inspecting gently. "Your texture's great," she said. "Full, healthy." He smiled slightly. "Appreciate that. Most people assume otherwise." She met his eyes in the mirror. Most people don't know much. As she worked, they talked. He told her about his childhood in Birmingham, his education at Howard, his years in D.C. and San Francisco. "I came back to the South," he said, "because I believe in what it can be, not just what it was." He talked about economic programs, youth mentorship, about funding black-owned startups that banks wouldn't touch. He didn't brag. He explained. She talked about growing up in Franklin, about her father's hardware shop, about her reasons for staying in Nashville, about how small things, haircuts, kindness, listening, could mean everything to someone who never felt seen. Brittany worked with precision. Each line clean, each fade blended, each gesture quiet and assured. Around them, the salon carried on, louder now. Someone turned up the music. A blow-dryer whined on full blast. Sandra made exaggerated laughter, as if to prove something. No one met Elliot's eyes. But he noticed. Brittany did too. When she finished, she removed the cape, brushed him clean, and handed him a mirror. He looked once, then twice. "Perfect," he said. "You're very good at this." She smiled. "Thank you. So are you, at being patient." He chuckled. "Comes with experience." He stood, pulled out his wallet, left a tip that made her blink, and offered a quiet, "You've made my day." Then he walked to the door. The moment he stepped outside, the room heard it. A low, purring engine, a sound too rich, too refined, to be anything ordinary. A pearl gray Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled to the curb. Behind it, a black BMW i7. A man in a dark suit stepped out, opened the rear door. Elliot Brown adjusted his cuffs, glanced back through the salon window. His gaze found Brittany. He gave her the kind of nod reserved for equals. Then he stepped into the car and disappeared. Inside the salon, silence reigned. One of the stylists muttered, "Was that?" Another gasped, "That's him!" "That's the guy from the Business Journal cover. He's the CEO of that venture firm, Brown Global Equity." Sandra's voice cracked slightly. "He's on the state finance board, isn't he?" But Brittany said nothing. She returned to her station, picked up her comb, and wiped down her chair. Her hands were steady, her heart full. And though no one said another cruel word that day, the silence was heavier than ever. Because now they knew, and she had always known, true class doesn't need to prove itself. It just walks in, sits down, and waits for the room to catch up. The day after Elliot Brown walked out of Bliss and Bell in a Rolls-Royce, the atmosphere inside the salon shifted, but not in the way Brittany had hoped. It wasn't just awkwardness or mild discomfort. It was something colder, pettier, and far more pointed. The stylists who had laughed the day before now whispered behind their phones, sharing glances across the floor, their words clipped and smiles tight. Brittany arrived early as usual, her warm "good morning" to the receptionist. Jan was met with a distracted nod. The orchid by the window looked slightly wilted. The air diffuser had run out of oil. Everything felt just a little off, like the moment before a storm when the air turns thick. By mid-morning, the tension began to spread in subtler ways. Sandra made jokes loud enough for everyone to hear, about clients who think they're better than everyone, or girls who tried too hard to impress the wrong people. Amy rolled her eyes when Brittany passed by. "I wonder if he tipped her with a stock portfolio," she muttered under her breath. It wasn't just gossip, it was punishment. Not for doing something wrong, but for doing something right that made the others look small. Brittany didn't respond. She kept her head down, hands steady, voice calm, and worked through her appointments like she always did. But inside, something was stirring. Not regret, not doubt, but something she hadn't named yet. Maybe pride, maybe weariness, or maybe just the realization that kindness always costs something. By lunchtime, the whispers took a different turn. A video had surfaced online, a quiet clip, only 45 seconds long, taken from the salon's security camera. It showed Elliot walking in, standing at the front desk, being ignored by nearly every stylist, and Brittany approaching him from across the floor. No sound, no edits, just silence, glances, and movement. But it spoke volumes. The caption was simple. "This still happens. Nashville, 2025. Within hours, the video had been shared on Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook. The comments were swift, angry, incredulous. Unbelievable. Looks like the 1950s never left this place. Shout out to the blonde stylist. She's the only one with a soul." Brittany didn't know who uploaded it. Maybe a client, maybe someone outside, but she saw it while eating a sandwich in the back room. Her hands froze when she saw her own face on the screen. Jan rushed in 5 minutes later, phone in hand. "We're trending," she said breathlessly. "It's going viral. Over 200,000 views in 3 hours. Sandra's freaking out." Brittany stood up slowly. "Why?" Jan scoffed. "Why? Because we look awful, that's why. Everyone's calling us racist. The owner just called from Atlanta. He wants a full report. He said this could ruin our rep. Sponsors, suppliers, everything." The panic was building, and yet Brittany felt oddly calm. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one shrinking under pressure. Back on the floor, voices rose and accusations began. Why didn't someone say something? We didn't know he was important. Well, maybe if he'd looked the part. Sandra's voice cracked like dry wood. "This is getting blown way out of proportion. It was just an honest mistake." Brittany couldn't take it anymore. She turned to face them, her voice quiet but firm. "It wasn't a mistake. You knew exactly what you were doing." The room froze. "You sized him up the second he walked in. You made assumptions, whispered jokes, turned your backs. Don't pretend this is about his title or his car. You didn't think he belonged. That's what this is about." The silence was thunderous. For a moment, no one could look her in the eye. Sandra opened her mouth, but no words came out. Amy stared at her shoes. Jan stood by the doorway, awkward and pale. Brittany didn't wait for a reply. She walked back to her station, picked up her brush, and resumed work on the older woman seated in her chair, who, unlike the others, gave her a gentle smile and a squeeze of the hand. "Good for you, honey," the woman whispered. "You did the right thing." By evening, news crews had called. Local papers were running the story. A regional blogger named it the Belle Meade Bias. There were rumors of protests, boycott calls, and anonymous Google reviews slamming the salon. But amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. At 4:15 p.m., a silver Tesla Model S pulled up quietly outside. A sharply dressed woman stepped out, heels clicking on the pavement. She opened the door and walked inside. The room turned to watch. "Brittany Saunders?" she asked. Brittany, surprised, stepped forward. "Yes?" The woman smiled. "Mr. Brown asked me to find you. He wanted to say thank you. Personally." She handed Brittany a sleek envelope. Inside was an invitation, an all-expense-paid trip to Atlanta for a private industry networking event hosted by Brown Global Equity. It was signed in ink. For Brittany, who saw what others didn't. Sandra's face twisted, as if she'd tasted vinegar. Amy's lips parted. Jan looked like she might faint. But Brittany just stood there, stunned, heart racing, unsure whether to cry, laugh, or simply exhale. That night, at home in her small apartment on the east side of town, Brittany sat at her kitchen table, the envelope beside her untouched, a cup of tea cooling slowly in her hands. She stared at the ceiling, hearing again the hiss of silence, the judgment, the way her co-workers turned Elliot into a punchline just because he didn't look like the kind of man they were used to serving. She remembered the way he waited, the way he read, the way he walked out not with vengeance, but with dignity. And she thought of her grandmother's words again, about storms, about how people carry their battles inside. That night, Brittany didn't scroll social media. She didn't reply to John's panicked texts. She didn't check the news. She just let the quiet come. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like peace. The following morning, the salon was quieter than usual. The usual upbeat playlists had been replaced by soft instrumental tunes that tried, unsuccessfully, to drown out the weight hanging in the air. No one spoke much. Even Sandra kept her mouth shut, her eyes dark and tired, as she rearranged the same 3 brushes at her station over and over. Jan fidgeted behind the front desk, answering phones with forced cheerfulness, while glancing nervously at her email notifications. Brittany arrived at 8 sharp, same as always, but this time she wasn't greeted with sarcasm or icy silence. Just absence. The usual sharp stares had faded into sidelong glances, tinged not with contempt, but with something closer to shame. She didn't bother pretending everything was normal. She hung her coat, prepared her tools, and set out her schedule for the day, all while aware of the shift happening around her. Something had cracked open, and though no one said it, they all knew it had been long overdue. By 10:30, a camera crew from a local news station showed up outside. They didn't enter, just took a few exterior shots, filmed the sidewalk, maybe hoping to catch a comment from a passing client. The footage, Brittany figured, would be edited down into a 60-second segment, just long enough for viewers to feel angry before moving on to the weather. But something else was beginning to grow, slowly, under the surface. People were asking questions. Calls from former clients trickled in, not to schedule appointments, but to express disappointment. A few regulars had emailed to cancel future visits, citing the viral video and their discomfort with what the salon seemed to stand for. No one yelled, no one made threats. But the damage was there, in the quiet refusal to return. Reputation, especially in towns like Nashville, wasn't always broken by scandals. Sometimes it simply withered under the heat of too much truth. Sandra, once the queen of the floor, had stopped holding court. Even Amy seemed unsure of her footing now, quieter, paler, more defensive in tone when she did speak. Brittany noticed that some stylists had begun to tiptoe around her, offering hollow compliments as if trying to rewrite the past few days through friendliness. But Brittany didn't need their approval anymore. What had shifted inside her was more permanent than any apology. She had learned that taking a stand didn't always feel like triumph. It often felt lonely. But it was also the only path that let you sleep at night with your head held high. That afternoon, Brittany's schedule was clear for a 2-hour window. She used it to clean her station meticulously, not because it needed it, but because the ritual calmed her nerves. She was almost finished when Jan called from the front. "Brittany," she said, voice trembling. "Someone's here to see you. It's Elliot Brown." The entire room stilled. Brittany walked to the front, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek, heart beating harder than she expected. Elliot stood in the doorway, dressed simply in a dark gray sweater, black slacks, and those same polished shoes. His presence didn't demand attention. It commanded it. He offered a polite smile, eyes warm but sharp. "May I come in?" Brittany nodded. "Of course." He stepped inside, ignoring the many pairs of eyes that watched him like he was a ghost. He didn't acknowledge them. His focus remained solely on her. "I wanted to thank you in person," he said. "I didn't come back for drama. I came because integrity should be recognized out loud." Brittany smiled, though her voice caught a little. "You didn't have to. I was just doing what anyone decent would have done." "That's the thing," he replied. "Not everyone does." He pulled a small envelope from his coat and handed it to her. "That event in Atlanta, it's still happening. I'd like you to speak, just 5 minutes, about character, about courage, not about hair." Her breath caught. "I'm not a speaker." "You're more than that," he said simply, then added, "I'll be there. So will a lot of people who need to hear what you already live." She took the envelope with both hands. Inside was the itinerary, a formal invitation, and a handwritten note at the bottom. Real change starts small, but it starts with someone. When he turned to go, something happened that no one expected. Sandra stood up. Her face was flushed, her arms crossed tight over her chest. "Mr. Brown," she called, her voice cracking. He paused, but didn't turn. I didn't mean for things to go that way," she said. "We all just—" She trailed off. "We didn't know who you were." He turned slightly, just enough for her to see his profile. "That's the point," he said. "You shouldn't have to." He left, and with him, a storm. Not of noise, but of silence that made everyone rethink the last 2 days. Brittany didn't say anything to Sandra. She didn't need to, because sometimes the most powerful thing isn't to win the argument. It's to live in a way that makes the argument irrelevant. The following week, Brittany flew to Atlanta. She stood in front of a crowd filled with entrepreneurs, CEOs, students, and educators. Her hands trembled slightly at the microphone, but her voice didn't falter. She spoke about what happened, not as a victim, but as a witness to how prejudice isn't always loud. Sometimes it comes dressed in polite laughter, in subtle exclusions, in the decision to say nothing. She talked about courage, not the kind that changes the world overnight, but the kind that changes the room you're standing in. When she finished, they stood. Elliot stood too, his smile steady, his eyes proud. Later, as they walked out into the night air, he told her something she never forgot. Most people don't know where their line is until they're standing right on top of it. You did. You chose right, even when it cost you. Back in Nashville, things at Bliss and Bell changed. Slowly, awkwardly. A new training program was implemented. New stylists were hired. A few old ones left quietly. The gossip dwindled. Clients returned, some cautiously, some with encouragement. And Brittany? She didn't become the owner or manager or some overnight hero. But she became the one people trusted, the one who spoke up, and more importantly, the one who never forgot what it meant to be seen. Because in a world where appearances matter too much, and silence speaks louder than words, kindness, when chosen with courage, has a weight that even the loudest whispers can't shake. In a world where appearances often dictate value and silence quietly supports injustice, it's easy to go along with the crowd, to ignore, to look away, or to pretend we don't see what's wrong. But real change doesn't begin with speeches or headlines. It starts in the small, quiet moments, like the one when Brittany chose to act with dignity and compassion, even when no one else did. This story isn't just about a salon or a single act of kindness. It's about the everyday choices we make when no one is watching. It's a reminder that respect should never be earned by status, skin color, or the car someone drives, but simply by the fact that we are all human. Brittany didn't make a grand statement. She just did the right thing. And sometimes that's what takes the most courage. Let her example be a spark for empathy, for awareness, and for the strength to stand up, even in rooms that stay silent.